Becky, could you do roll call?
Sure can. Councilmembers Perkins?
Here.
DeLucy?
Here.
Hobart?
Here.
And do you want just a rundown of who's in the meeting, Councilmember DeLucy?
Well, I think that the management analyst is a member of the committee, and Brian Kidney. Yeah, I want to run down. I don't know if they're members or not.
They're not, but the people who are in attendance today are Brian Kidney, Cindy Gray, Jim Nail, Tom Coleco, Mark Perry, Nancy Cooper, Pam Coleman, Ryan Feldman, Sarah White, Steve Wagner, Zach Walker, and myself.
Wow.
Okay, I'm going to make an announcement. The first item of our business is approval of the minutes from November 30, 2020. I want to remind everybody that we canceled the December meeting because of the hacking that occurred with the city. There was a lot going on, and I thought staff should have been paying more attention to fixing the hacking than dealing with our audit and finance meeting. Therefore, that meeting of December, I think it was the 18th, was canceled. And since that time, here we are, January 22nd. We have not had a chance to do the minutes because the person that was going to do the minutes had an illness. So we will have to take up the November minutes in February. And so let's move on to the standing items. Update by Mr. Toma Perry, the management analyst.
Good afternoon. In the interest of the time, since we've got a lot on the agenda today,
Yeah.
I thought I would be quick here. Going through the 4 different areas. Capital project update. I have completed the 15-year look back for capital projects for the utilities, for power and light, water, and sewer. What I'm going to do at this point is do a handoff, work with the city manager to fill in more detail, to get more detail from the department, things like the what the project description, things like that. So flush that out a little bit so we have a better understanding of what the money that we've looked at, that I've looked at over the last 15 years have been spent on, and what the current budgets, what the current budgeted amounts are being spent on. So hopefully we'll have that done over the course of the next month and be able to get another step done on that project, and then I'll continue to work on the other funds as well. So we hit that milestone. I thought that'd be good to move that along. Overtime. I have begun the overtime field work. Gone in, started collecting the data, looking at the data, trying to get a better understanding of how overtime is allotted. I'm kind of going through in terms of expenditures, looking at prioritizing how I spend my time. So I've started with fire at this point, and going through and trying to identify, make sure I identify and understand all the work rules and things like that, all the things that impact the pay and overtime. Fleet management, I think we may need to revisit this or have a conversation at some point with the city manager based on the action that was taken by council within the last few months in terms of leasing equipment and things like that. So I'm not sure if that still needs to proceed, but we should have that conversation sooner rather than later, probably. And then city finances over the last month, I have not had any specific, done any specific work, just kind of generally looking at the monthly reports and keeping abreast of what's going on. So short and to the point, I'll be happy to answer any questions from the committee.
Mark, I apologize. You were really breaking up with the capital projects. So on your capital projects, you hope to have a report in a month. Is that what you said?
capital projects, I should have the preliminary report for the utility companies for power and light, water, and sewer. Hopefully, we'll get project descriptions and detail from the departments over the next month, and be ready to start looking at what's happened over the last 15 years.
And I was especially focused in on seeing if there are projects that still have allocated funds that have been abandoned.
Correct.
Talking about also, okay.
Yes. So what you'll see is, beginning back in about 2005, how those funds have been allocated on an annual basis, what's been spent on an annual basis, and then where the current funds, what the current status of the funds are.
And Mark, rather than just have someone tell us that, yeah, that project's still a go, I would like to know when the last action was done on projects.
Say that again, please.
I would like to know when the last action was actually taken on a project if the department says that project is still in the works. I mean, I could have a project that's still a go and I haven't worked on it in 4 years. And I think that would be a very relevant thing for this committee to know when we're looking at making a good use of every dollar.
Right.
Could
and
you
there
build that in?
Yes, there are a few instances where it looks like the departments will budget for kind of routine maintenance that may happen every 3 or 4 years. So that may build up and then it gets spent down in 1 year, but they keep it as a regular. So those are the kinds of things that we want to make sure that we address and understand from the department's point of view. Like, well, why do you have $1 million sitting there? Well, it could be because that's just budgeted a little bit every year so that they've got it saved up.
Anyone else have any questions for the management analyst?
You were breaking up, Councilwoman DeLucia, at that first part of that question. You cleared up quite nicely towards the end there. What was the portion of your question at the beginning?
I was apologizing that I have a lousy machine and that Mark Perry was breaking up, and I asked him to make sure that we're going to be getting a written report in a month or so. I just wanted to verify that.
Okay.
Mr. Hobart, any questions? Mr. Kidney, would you like to move on to the operating and finance reports?
Yes, ma'am, I'd be happy to. You all hopefully received both the November and the December reports this last week, and hopefully had a chance to take a look at them. I would be, I could, again, every month, I'm not really sure if you want me to point out some highlights or if you have specific questions. I would say just right out front, November, we did receive our property tax receipt. And so you'll see, say in the general fund and then the health property tax funds, you'll see that tax line item actually for the first time in November and December look like it's caught up. If you remember in the past, the monthly reports, the property tax, they were in the negative or had not collected anything yet. But now both in the general fund and then also in the health property tax funds, we do show those revenues come in and came in right at, or actually just a little bit over budget. So I'll point that out. On the general fund, just page 1, I just mentioned property tax. That line item for taxes includes property sales and also franchise taxes. And as you notice, they're coming in quite nicely. Again, I just mentioned the property taxes. The sales taxes, we're at about 54%. And you'll see that in the sales tax funds where it's just sales tax for the line item. But we're at 54% of what we had anticipated in budgeting or anticipated in collecting. And so we are happy to see that. Now, keep in mind, we did lower our the budget on what we expected to receive. So it's not like, even though we're bringing in a little bit more sales tax, it's not more than we've received in the past. It's more than what we anticipated receiving of a lower amount. But happy to see that it actually is coming in on that. The really a couple of things that are the most difficult and troubling for us in the general fund, and you'll see that in charges for services and fines and forfeitures. You'll see both of those line items down. Charges and services, those are set, things like code enforcement, transit service revenues go into that. It looks like those revenue sources aren't going to recover for the year. That will probably be down and only bring in probably $1 million for this year. So you can see where that is a challenge for us. And then, fines and forfeitures with court had been closed during the pandemic, and we anticipate really only bringing in $2 million for the year. So you could see right off the bat where we have some challenges on the revenue side, and thankfully that we do have the property and sales tax coming in right at or right above where we wanted to see for budget. On the expenditures, I'm sorry, I'll stop right there. I'm kind of talking pretty fast. Anything on the revenue side of things that you want to maybe have me clarify? Okay. With nothing, I'll move on then on the expenditure side. Pretty much, really the only area, probably a little bit of concern, is fire. That usually comes in either overtime, and I think our retiree insurance is kind of impacting that. We have a lot of retirees in the fire department that the retiree insurance is. In the public line item, public works, you'll see that it's up a little bit, but that's pretty much expected going into snow season where we have supplies. We did have a snow event on a holiday, which causes some overtime. There's nothing in that really causes me over abundance of concern on that.
So, excuse me, Brian, I noticed that police went up 2 million, fire went up 2 million, community development went up $1 million. So that's 5 million. Are you saying that most of that is overtime or health insurance costs? I'm confused.
When you say up, are you talking from month over month?
Yes, I'm looking at November and comparing it to December. And fire for example, in November was 10.2, and now it's 12 million.
Yeah. I mean, that's not entirely out of whack. I mean, we do have a pretty good salary, benefits, expenditures each month in those departments. I was doing more of a comparison of the December 31st statements, where we are in relation to budget. So.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I wasn't really doing a month over month comparison. I'm kind of focusing on December, since December encompasses the November report already. I'm sorry, I probably should have clarified that before I started. So those percentages and line items, I was really talking specifically on the December reports.
Okay.
One question, if I might. So with the overtime costs with police and fire, with the COVID and some that are in various forms of either quarantined or in quarantine, have to stay at home. So the overtime costs to help cover those shifts, are those funds covered under the CARES Act funding that we can use to offset whatever expenditures we might have on that cost?
Well, yes and no. So we focused the CARES reimbursement on those things that FEMA would not reimburse us for. Okay. So we first focused on getting in the general fund and covering those things that FEMA won't reimburse us. So we're FEMA, the public assistance grant that we'll be filing for, that should come in, but FEMA usually takes in the past several years. Hopefully it's a lot quicker this year. So we won't necessarily see those reimbursements coming in this fiscal year to help us. And that's why the manager's budget and the council adopted included that CARES reserve amount of 1.4 million in there. Or that's one of the reasons why we have that in there. So we're hoping with that reserve that we do have in there that would cover some of that shortfall due to COVID related expenses that will be reimbursed eventually from CARES.
I just noticed that our fund balance in general fund went down $2 million. Just mentioning that to everybody in the world. So we no longer have a 9%, it looks more like a 7% reserve. On the street improvements, which is page 2, the capital projects on here is $17,864,338. My question, Brian, is each, where it says capital projects, so is all of that $17 million allocated to specific projects? Or is that part of the $15 million that we bonded out in order to do our general maintenance?
A little bit of both, actually. And I'll try to walk through this. There's two things on the street sales tax that is important when it comes to the capital project. First is the capital outlay line item expenditure that shows 4.9 as being originally budgeted, $29 million as an amended budget. And what that amount includes are all of those debt funded street projects that's kind of rolled over. And actually you mentioned or your management analyst had mentioned about the capital projects, about those projects that have been approved in the past. Our hope is that we'll get to the point where you'd be able to turn the page and then you'll see a list of all those projects. So you'll see it in that line item, but then yes, down in the fund balance portion where it says debt reserve project accounts, capital projects of 17.8 million, that's the cash that's set aside that we haven't spent of the debt funded cash yet. So we issued debt, we have $17 million available to spend on those capital projects. And so so you see those both there.
But we haven't earmarked each dollar of that $17 million towards specific projects.
Yes, yeah. Municipal services they have a pretty good indication of how that's going to be spent over the next 2 years.
Is it possible for us to get a listing of the capital projects from the various departments?
Absolutely. Again, and that's what I just. Believe me, it would help me also. We have this not only in the street portion, but also obviously in the utilities. And I know the utility departments, they do have that and they do review that from time to time. I believe the PUAB would ask them and they'll go through the list or deliver that. So that is an item. And actually I'm gonna, so I have Sarah White on this call also. And what I've asked Sarah to do is keep notes for us. So we'll make sure that we're able to bring back next meeting these kind of things that you're asking for. So I'm just gonna, I don't know, Sarah, if you want me to touch my nose, that make sure we make a note of that or whatever, that we'll want to make sure that we bring back next month. So that's
so I'll make sure we have it.
All right, thank you.
Rob, I don't want to interrupt your flow, so you tell me, what do you want to do? I have specific questions, but maybe you want to finish your report and then I'll get to my questions.
You know what? I have a feeling that most of my questions or just generally speaking, your questions will probably address anything I would have said anyway. So I'd like to really, again, for time purposes, just really focus on your questions. The only other thing I had highlighted is that COVID reserve that I just mentioned that we haven't touched yet, that we're we're hoping to that will use to help with that overtime or that fall in revenues. And then just pointing out the streets, parks, storm, those special sales tax funds, that you'll see that the sales tax is around 54% of what we had planned for, as opposed to 50%. So that's the only other things I was going to really point out. But I definitely stand for any questions that you would have.
And I don't know if you can really answer this, or if maybe the city manager can answer it. I don't know. But I've been looking, like the animal shelter use tax. That's on page 7.
Okay.
The use tax is up like $61,000 in expenditures. We've spent it. And then I go to the health levy tax, and I see that we've spent $474,000 on animal services. So I guess my question is, if we have $597,000 in the animal shelter use tax that can only be used for animal shelter, why are we spending health property tax levy money on animals? I mean, we just got our health department back. I know that we need to have employees hired. I know we need a place for it. And is that the best use of the money? I mean, I don't understand why we would use $500,000 of health property levy when we could use it.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great question. And actually you brought up, let me start off by highlighting two things on the animal shelter use tax and the public safety sales tax. Just to address that, I should have had this highlighted. So, and what we're talking about is page 7 on for the health use tax. Page 7, you'll notice that we had budgeted $750,000. The actual amount is $750,000, and that's because we capped it at $750,000. If you recall, the ballot language said that the waterfall, the first $750,000 would go. Now, if you would then switch over to the next page, page 8, you can see that anything over $750,000 for anything over $1.5 million is actually then going all into the police use tax. So this fund will fill up basically to where we said it would pay for 30 officers. And right now we're using, basically as a rule of thumb, $100,000 per hiring officer. So this fund would fill up to $3 million. And so when the revenue for use tax here hits 3 million, and you could see we're halfway there, then any other use tax, and we're expecting in May and June of this year, we'll actually hit that $3 million total. And when that happens, then any additional use taxes then will go to the general fund and the special sales tax funds based on that allocation of our normal sales tax. So I did want to just point that out. Just that's logistically how that's going to look. So you're not going to have any more revenues in the use tax in the animal shelter use tax because we've hit that 750. You'll see the maximum use tax in the police one at 3 million. And then you'll start seeing a use tax line item in the general fund and then the special sales tax funds that will hopefully probably pick up at least June of this year for the last month of the fiscal year when we've hit those amounts. But getting back again to your question about what's allocated for use tax versus the health property tax, if I understand, the use tax is being spent primarily on personnel services for very specifically animal shelter uses. The allocation between those two, I believe, came up as part of the budget process. And I think we would just need to talk to the director out there and just kind of talk about whether or not we need to do a budget amendment then to take future expenditures out of the property tax rather than the use tax portion, as you say. So I think that's just, as long as we're within the proper use of both the property tax and the use tax, I think it's a matter of policy as you say.
And maybe that's a discussion for a study session, gentlemen. You know, we didn't have our health department back when we did this budget. We do have the health department. I fought like the dickens to make sure that the health property tax levy was not renamed the animal shelter tax levy, because I kept believing we would have a health department back. So I know that we're allowed to use the health property tax levy for more than the animal shelter. And so I think maybe that's something we should be discussing in a study session.
That would be fine with me, putting that to a study session. And also with the way the state funding is, from my understanding, we will not be receiving state allocation of funds until June or
Correct.
July of this year to help fund our health department. So that would be in line with some discussion on how we can use some of our own money for that as well.
That's what I'm thinking. Yeah. Okay. Brian, is it a real pain? Because I do compare month to month. And like when something goes up $2 million or something goes down $800,000, that's bells and whistles to me, because I do a month to month comparison. And I wondered, instead of me sweating for 3 hours the night before our meetings going through each document, if we couldn't have a standing highlight, like definitely the general fund, definitely the enterprise funds, definitely the street fund. I mean, the larger funds, we don't need to go over each and every SID and NID, but the highlights, and maybe you can, in each fund, if there's no big thing, there's no big variance, then there's really nothing to report. Mm-hmm. But if we have a variance of 5 to 10% from month to month, I think that's big enough that we should be alerted to it. Is that possible?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll focus on month over month large variances, and then also any budget to actual variances. Now, I will say, you know, when you're talking about actual dollar figures, we need to keep in mind that, you know, is that more than 1/12 of an increase over the previous month, right? Is it more than normal? You know, when you're talking about a $24 million police department, $2 million is, I mean, that's a normal monthly increase. So, but
it is in your world. It's not in my world. Seriously, that's a big number to me. It just
yeah.
And so I guess in your world it's not, but you know, if it's $2 million of a $24 million budget, that's a substantial portion of the budget. It's stuff like that I would want to be alerted to.
Okay.
And another question I had, I know that tourism got $1 million in grants, but it's on the grant page, it's not on the tourism page. And I just didn't understand that.
Correct. You know, that grant fund is used for a lot of different grants, and that's just we just have our control process really set up for that grant fund. So we really do prefer that those one-time grants like that are put into a grant fund, so they're not intermingled with non-grant expenditures. And so we do prefer that. Nancy's on the call, our accounting supervisor. She can maybe talk to that if she has any particular reason for that. But honestly, when we get a large grant, it is better to kind of set it aside so it doesn't get intermingled, if you will, with normal operating expenditures. But Nancy, is there anything you might want to add to that?
No, that's exactly why. It just it makes it a little bit easier by keeping it out of the other funds, so it doesn't kind of skew those other budget numbers for like the general fund or the tourism fund. Keeps it kind of in its own fund, and it also makes it easier when we get to audit and the CAFR and the single audit on the grants, where we have those grant expenditures and revenues in one fund. A little bit easier tracking for accounting.
So I guess Okay, I've been looking at these sheets as a photo of, for example, animal shelter use tax, okay? I look at that sheet, page 7, and I see we got 750,000, we spent 313,000, and so our total fund balance is 658,000. But yet 2 pages later, I see that 447,000 from the health levy went in to fund the animal shelter. But that 440,000 isn't on this sheet. And that's because it's not the use tax money. So where do I get a global overview of the shelter, for example? How much the income comes in, how much the expenses are? Because if I don't know that to look at page 9 and add it to page 7, I don't have a global picture.
I'm gonna say again, Sarah, maybe if you could take a note of that. And what you're asking for is, obviously it's more of it is a management way to look at the reports.
Right.
The reason that we do these reports is this is the legal limit. This is the fund by sources that we're legally restricted keeping funds in its own required fund. So for instance, we can't have a report, or we can't combine use tax and that property tax in the same fund, legally speaking.
Could we have a report on the operating mechanics of the animal shelter?
But what you're saying is, yeah, then we could also then start adding an operational report then, which is actually, if you look at the city budget, the way that's put together does show that.
Those numbers are so many.
I think what we're talking about basically, Brian, is a P&L by department.
Absolutely. We have that, or we don't have that. We could produce those. It's just, again, we started with, hey, here's the documents that you've always received, and we've always said, hey, if there's a different way you want to see these things, we'll build that. I've been a little hesitant about having staff build new reports that people aren't asking for. So I think that certainly a very reasonable thing to be asking, especially when you have multiple funding sources into the same operation.
Yeah, that's a good idea, Councilmember Delucci. And I'm glad. Hopefully that won't be too hard, Mr. Kidney. Will be a fairly straightforward process for you. But yeah, that would be pretty helpful.
And Mr. Toma Perry, are you there? Can you help? I mean, I feel like I'm asking finance to do so much. They're already stretched.
I could tell you we could handle this report without Mr. Toma Perry's assistance. Okay. Thank you, Mark.
Anybody have any other questions on the operating reports? No? Okay. Oh. New business. First quarterly review of IPL in response to the July 2020 Management Analyst Report. Mr. Neal, are you on the line?
Yes, Councilmember, I am.
There you are. Go right ahead, sir.
As you know, 2020 was quite a busy year. Everything from me moving from the NERC unit into the director's office. We had the report from the analyst. We had the report from the consultant. We've been working with the PUAB for a priority list, and all these things kind of overlap. But and I can assure you that Power and Light staff are working on making improvements where we can. At your request, we took a look at specifically the analyst report, and we provided you a spreadsheet that has all the 15 recommendations that were in the a snapshot update of where we are on addressing those issues, and then the third column has kind of a next steps that we're looking at taking to continue improving in those areas.
So we haven't implemented ExecuTime yet.
No, ExecuTime has not been implemented, and I'll defer to Brian on that one.
Can you give me a ballpark, Brian?
So I think this would be a good time to actually introduce Pam. Pam is our project manager for the Munis project. And actually, surprising, I'm happy to say also Ron Luce has decided to join our call also. So you had asked, we didn't make this part of the agenda item, but we did include a update of the Munis product. So maybe, Jim, I don't want to take away during your presentation, but Pam, if you or Ron could answer her question about the implementation of where we are with that, that'd be great.
Yeah, did you distribute, Brian, this is Ron. Good afternoon, everyone. Did they distribute the one pager that we sent out?
Yes.
Okay, so the project, the Munis implementation completion project, we are on schedule right now. I'm joined today by Pam Coleman, who's our new project PM. She's a contract PM, and she and I will be working together to take this project across the finish line this year. So accomplishments, we did the fire pay recalculations were completed, and refunds and repayment plans are all established. That's a good thing to get that past us. We're working on the fixed asset project right now. We just the contract was negotiated and signed with Duff and Phelps, and they're going to be getting work on the fixed projects, the fixed assets. That should be completed by the end of April. Pam and I have begun our conversations with engaging Tyler Professional Services to gauge how much help we're gonna need from them. We've had a number of meetings. We began our human resources gap analysis. We just met with them this week, and we're working on getting a more granular list of stakeholders to make sure we take everybody's needs into account when we're looking at the gaps in the HR system and then the payroll. The Munis system software upgrade is underway right now. We've completed the prerequisites, and that's on target to be done by, I believe, the end of March. So things are going well. We're cooking right along. So I don't know if there are any questions that you have for us in particular. We're happy to answer them.
Yeah, Mr. Luce, this is Dan Hobart. And I don't expect you to give out details or anything, but the city had an intrusion in its network. Has that affected your work with Munis? And I'm, like I said, I don't need like secret, sensitive details, but
okay,
just in general.
So I can't speak to the IT security breach in the city IT. However, I can say that I think for the most part, it has not affected us. It has not affected our schedule. Munis is a cloud application, so it's hosted someplace else. So I believe anyone else chime in, Brian or Pam, but I don't believe that's impacted us in any way, our project.
Good.
This is Brian.
I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. I do want to mention, no, it didn't impact us at all. Not with the security of Munis itself. Excuse me. I will say it did impact our ability to produce monthly financial reports. And I'm only saying that because I really want to give a high five to my staff I was really impressed I got the December reports out, but I think we're up and running, and so we should be good. But thanks for that question, because I wanted to point out how great my staff was. Thanks.
That's good. And Mr. Luce, looking at your timeline, it looks like you've got a finish date of this year, the very end of the year. So as we're barely into the year, but looking at the product as a whole, I'm just looking for confirmation or affirmation that you really think that's an achievable, doable deal.
I do. Yes. It's interesting you mentioned that, because Pam and we were meeting with HR this week, the senior managers in HR. One of the challenges we're going to have is mission creep, right? Because there are certain things we want to accomplish, and that's outlined in the report. However, I'm sure we're going to come up with other things that need to be addressed. So what we plan on doing is we're going to stick to our plan and accomplish what we set out to accomplish. if there are things that come up and they're not like super urgent, but they need to get taken care of, Pam and I are going to make sure we document those and make sure that could be a phase 2. If we do find something that's real urgent, we may come back to you all and say, hey, we found something else. We feel this is pretty urgent. It may push the plan back a month or so, but we feel like we have to get this done. So that might happen, but right now we're still on plan. Did that make sense?
Yeah, of course, absolutely.
Yeah.
And this question is really more for Mr. Kidney and maybe Mr. Nail. Jim, I looked at the IPL update from Mr. Toma Perry's report last summer, and so I looked at your, answers to it, your responses to it, and a number of the items are sort of waiting on Munis or in conjunction with Munis. Do either of you folks, or maybe Ron Luce knows, but do we have a separate timeline that you could set out for sort of these IPL items? Do we know for sure yet?
I'm not familiar with the IPL items, so
yeah. Brian,
yeah.
do you know what I'm?
Yeah, I think this leads right in exactly what Ron was talking about, mission creep. And that
Gotcha.
What Ron and Pam are very focused on was that preliminary report that we did about, hey, here's the minimum standards we want to get the Munis system for the financial statements and for payroll up and running. I know a lot of these things do dovetail then in with Jim's plan, and also with CityWorks too. I think there's multiple software products. Yeah, we certainly want to help. I mean, these projects are very important, but what Ron is focused on right now is just that we can take a look at, setting up separate timelines. Once Munis gets to a point where it would dovetail in, I think that's certainly doable, that we can kind of talk about those timelines. But right now we have not done that direct communication between IPL and Munis when it comes to, hey, when exactly are these two systems tying in?
If it, so, and then this is ultimately what the thought is in my head. We've got IBEW negotiations again this year, and their contract runs out at the end of the year. And if Munis will help us get accurate data and accurate employee data and accurate timekeeping, if that will improve the information available to us, it seems to me that would be extremely helpful as we come up in those negotiations. So I'm guessing my other council members on this committee would agree, and they may chime in, but I'd really like to see that part move forward and be implemented, enough in advance that we can use the data, if that's possible.
Exactly. And yeah, we're just finishing up other union negotiate. We are using Munis to mine the data that we need in order to produce the management reports we need as part of those discussions. So we are already using Munis for that.
Okay.
I think some of the issues that we're looking at the tying things are more of the project accounting and more of the things like that. I think those things that we don't need for that level of negotiations, if you will. I think I feel pretty comfortable that we're going to be able to mine whatever data we need for any type of union negotiation.
Did Adam Norris just put his hand up?
He did.
Hope I didn't say something I shouldn't have.
No, I just I'm trying to exercise proper meeting etiquette by raising my hand here. I just want to reinforce what Brian said. Absolutely, the data we've been able to get in our recent negotiations has been very, very helpful and useful for us in determining, some costing information and everything else. So the quality is much improved over when I first started with the city, and it's much appreciated and very, very helpful for us. So I just wanted to reiterate that.
Yeah, and I understand that jumping on IPL issues is a popular and easy thing to do, but as everybody on this call knows, and Mr. Luce, if you didn't, you're about to find out, but IPL issues are such a big deal. And Mr. Nail, we understand you've been tossed out of the frying pan into the fryer, and you've got probably one of the heaviest workloads of any city employee in front of you this year. So, you know, you're going to hear all. Obviously, that's top of mind for most of us, and we're just concerned and interested in the moving forward where we can, when we can, with updating and efficiency.
Right, and I think that the efficiency is really the question here. As Brian pointed out, we've got access to data. It's just that some of our legacy systems and Munis don't yet necessarily link together easily, but it's very important that Ron and his team get through their portion before we can really start to address some of that coordination side.
One other specific question for you, Mr. Nail, then I'll let the other folks go. On the GPS on the vehicles, of course, I've got friends that have fleets in their businesses, and this is super common these days. It looks like there's a software picked out. What's the status of putting GPS on IPL vehicles and be able to keep track of them in real time?
We don't currently have a project to put GPS on the vehicles, but what we do have we have some tough books, tablets that we've got for all the crew leaders, and we are working with tech services to get those activated so that all the crew leaders would have tough books out in the field that they could actually connect to the network. Obviously December and early January threw a wrench into that timeline. We'll continue to work with tech services on that, and I'll keep you updated on how we're doing.
Sure, appreciate that, and that's my questions for now. Thank you, folks. Thank you, fellas.
Councilman, if I could jump in.
Sure.
Councilman Hobart said it real well. We don't want to pick on IPL, but this is the topic of discussion. In looking at some of these action points, this is going to carry over, obviously, into negotiations and a lot of these action points with the leadership team there. So just want to make sure that everybody understands that this isn't something this committee will just going to carte blanche do. These will be negotiated work agreements and stuff that will be hashed out between Local 53 and in the City of Independence. So this isn't anything that we're just making here. This is a continued conversation that's going to be moving forward.
Right.
Mr. Neal, I just I see on your sheet you say completed and completed. Well, some of these that I'm looking at the report, timesheets could be altered and continue to sell if changes have been made before or after the superintendent signed the timesheet. I mean, has that been fixed, or are we waiting for Munis for that? I mean,
no. What we've done is right now we use a paper timesheet. The timesheets are all based on job orders, and so a crew leader, if they got one big job, it could be last several days, or they could and they'll turn in a daily sheet for what they're accomplishing, or if they hit 2 or 3 jobs in a day, they'll have 2 or 3 sheets total for that day for their crew. As those get completed, they get turned into the superintendents. The superintendents review them. Then goes to the timekeeper who does the entries. It makes it up to my office where Robert Stillwell, who's handling our administrative side, Robert and I review them. Anywhere along the way, someone could discover that somebody's math was off by 1, or if you work till 6 p.m., you get a meal allowance, and supervisors forgot to put that on there. rather than send that piece of paper all the way back to the supervisor and through and back through that entire chain again, we'll do emails, phone calls, find out what the right data is, update it, do a pen and ink update on that sheet. And what I asked the supervisors, the timekeepers, the superintendents is, if you're the one making that change, just initial that you did it. Put a note on there so that we have a trackable paper trail. And we keep all those records so that we can see if there's any question later, hey, I submitted this, but I only got paid that. We can go back and we can find out exactly what happened.
And once Munis is fully implemented, are we going to get rid of those paper trails?
I believe the ExecuTime is supposed to do part of that. We'll have to wait and see. Our FERC accounting, in order to do our FERC accounting, payroll is broken up into some very detailed categories. There's like 15 to 20 different types of activity on a timesheet, and the supervisors have to figure out whether this is construction, deconstruction, digging a hole, filling a hole. And believe it or not, the time they spend stocking their truck does not count as time worked on that job. The time driving to and from the site doesn't count as time worked on that job. If they have to spend an hour waiting on AT&T to remove some interference, that doesn't count as time worked on the job. So it goes into this unassigned block. All of those have to add up, and right now the paper sheets are the best way to handle that. We'll have to work with payroll to see how we're going to translate that into ExecuTime. And we haven't seen any of that yet, so that'll be a work in progress.
And I might add too that we're gonna have to figure out where's the line between CityWorks, between ExecuTime, and where's the best place to capture that data, right? You and I need to chat, James. So anyways, I think we can work together on that and figure out how to the best do that with whatever the timekeeping solution is.
Yeah, at the moment, if we were to do timekeeping exclusively in Munis, then our timekeepers would have to duplicate all that work to capture it in FERC accounting terms on our side of the fence. And I'd rather not have those people have to do that at the moment.
So are we going to be done with the IPL angle on Munis and ExecuTime and the fixed assets? You know, we're hopefully going to have a summary of the fixed assets of IPL. Is all this going to happen by the end of this fiscal year, do you think? Or what are we looking at?
This is Brian. I'll address the capital assets. We are in the middle of we're starting an inventory process, a comprehensive inventory process, which has been a great project because we're receiving pressure from insurance companies to have more up-to-date listings. We have our Munis project, which included budget and the ability to move into a new fixed asset system, a capital system. So it's kind of a great opportunity for us to go out and take insurance money and in part of this Munis budget to go and do an overall comprehensive inventory. And I believe they're starting on that in March. And then we should have that completed by the end of the year. So
the end of the calendar year or
fiscal year? Yeah, it will be. I've set the goal for this project to be done by June 30th for our audit. So I've been hitting that pretty hard.
And I might also mention that Brian's team and my team are working together on a FERC accounting update to make sure that we're following best practices and how to make our systems interact to accomplish that. So that'll be a great help.
I want to bust in real quick, Mr. Nail, on the FERC accounting. It's a common thing that's said that we stopped FERC accounting. Are we back in it? Where do we stand on that?
We didn't stop FERC accounting. FERC accounting has, I guess historically it's been sort of internal to IPL, and when we had our own IPL accounting manager, and they handled all that. Part of it was built into the J.D. Edwards reporting system and some of the other legacy systems that we had. Going forward, trying to capture that same level of data in CityWorks and Munis together is where the challenge is. So no, we've not stopped doing FERC accounting. We did lose a big chunk of our FERC expertise, which we're working on trying to get that built back up.
Very good. Thank you.
Jim, I do appreciate your response, but I didn't get it till this morning, and I was working today, so I really have not had a chance to review what you've given us.
Yeah, I apologize for that. I'll be happy to answer any questions you have at any time.
I'd appreciate it, because I really have not had a chance to look at it, and I'm not questioning it other than I need to look at it.
Sure.
So, anybody else have any other questions on it? Okay, then the second item of new business is an update on the debt status of the city's various economic development projects, presented by our own Brian Kidney.
Thank you. So this is a project that, we started, I believe the council asked for this 3 or 4 months ago, very specifically on the Crackerneck transaction. We gave an update on the Crackerneck, and then also on the Santa Fe debt. And this is just a natural extensive. Councilmember DeLucia had asked me, well, can we do this for all the other debt for economic development things? And I thought it was a great opportunity to do so. So I've asked Tom Calico with Baker Tilly. He's our financial advisor on non-utility transaction. He's the lead financial advisor helping us with the Crackerneck Creek refunding project that we're working on. But he and his staff, which also includes Jack Ryan Feldman, put together just a quick summary, and I'll just turn it over then to Tom and Jack. I think they just have a PowerPoint presentation that they could share their screen with, just kind of show the summary of these projects. Tom, you there?
I'm here. Thank you, Brian. Council members, good to be with you this afternoon. As Brian mentioned, I'm joined virtually by my colleague, Jack Ryan Feldman, who's going to help me with the presentation. So let me go ahead. Brian, is it okay if I go ahead and share my screen?
Yeah, Tom, I think that's fine. I don't know about the other members. Your audio is really cutting out.
Is it? I've been unfortunately having internet trouble of late. Is it any better? No?
No.
Why don't we try Jack's audio and see if it's any better?
Yeah, can you guys hear me all right? All right. Maybe I'll drive, Tom.
That'd be great.
All right. So thanks everyone for being here. Here's the high level summary of the of all of the TIF debt, or all of the economic development bonds that are supported by TIF revenues and the city's annual appropriation pledge. As you all are aware, we've got Centerpoint, we've got Crackerneck Creek, we've got Drum Farm, Eastland, Hartman Heritage, and Santa Fe. And so this is kind of the headline table. We'll dive into each of these. But if you're looking for one slide to take home with you, this is that. We've got the outstanding bond balance. We've got the last fiscal year's unaudited revenues and expenditures. And then also just a quick gut check of where we're at. And as you'll see, and we'll talk about Centerpoint, Drum Farm, and Eastland, the financial outlook on those are good. No adjustments needed at this time. Whereas Crackerneck Hartman, and Santa Fe, as we'll discuss. There's adjustments that'll be needed in the short and or medium term for those. Moving first into the CenterPoint TIF, we've got 3 series of bonds that are outstanding for those, with the final maturities in 2027 and 2028. You got about $18 million in bonds outstanding. As you all know, the project that is underlying all of this is the CenterPoint Medical Center, as well as the medical office and the cancer center. This TIF terminates in 2027, and the TIF revenues are currently projected to meet the debt service obligations. So no concerns with that TIF. Pilots and EATS are generating well in excess of what's necessary for the debt service on those bonds. Moving on to Crackerneck, there are 5 series of bonds that are outstanding with varying final maturity dates. The nearest of which is 2024. And then we've got another final maturity in 26, 28, 29. And then the 2015 C bonds are a longer term bond with serial maturities going out to 2045. The project description, what was contemplated, is over, it's 192 acres, retail, mixed use, Bass Pro, and a hotel. The financial status for Crackerneck, the TIF itself terminates in 2027. However, there are the I-70 and Little Blue Parkway TIF, projects 1 and 3 terminates in 2035. Though that TIF was activated to generate additional revenue for the Crackerneck Creek debt service, and so that will help us as we make kind of additional adjustments to this debt service in the future. Between the revenues generated by Crackerneck and the revenues generated by the I-70 Little Blue Parkway TIF, the TIF revenues are currently projected to be insufficient to pay debt service in fiscal year 2022. There's some bullet maturities that are coming with these with the outstanding debt that absent any adjustments, there would be some just a spike in debt service payment that the city would have to cover. And as we'll discuss, and probably as part of the Q&A, we can talk about, this is one of the TIFs that we've identified, and staff and consultants are currently working to refund specific series of bonds to restructure the debt to match the projected revenue stream for Crackerneck and Little Blue Parkway. Any questions so far, or should I keep on rolling?
Excuse me, I have a question.
Sure.
If we amend this TIF agreement to allow residential so that we get real estate taxes, would the real estate taxes go towards staying on the TIF?
So I can answer that. We can make that as part of the amendment to do that. We've preliminarily looked at the numbers on there. They're honestly the any type of increment, it's not going to be a huge change. If you're looking at these outstanding balances, the real driver of these type of revenues are sales taxes, not property taxes. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
Mr. Feldman, so obviously these numbers are a bit overwhelming considering we've got 5 years to pay $14 million. What are the adjustments that are available? Is it literally just combining different bonds into, consolidating debt and then getting a new payment that stretches out for 100 years?
I can get into the specifics of it, but Brian, do you want to do kind of a 50,000 foot level of what we're trying to do?
Yeah, that's exactly right. Council member, it's a stretching out and then also refinancing transactions. And now that I'm speaking, I believe one of the work sessions that we did was probably before your time on the council. So it may not be a bad idea to refresh this. And actually will. This transaction, or what we're working on, is coming to a head. We see things moving pretty quickly coming up on the restructuring or alternative of this. But basically what the plan would be is to do refund, and then we have a lot of other TIFs. I think you've noticed that we have 20 or 17 outstanding TIFs. As those TIFs expire, the increment that would be going to the general fund would then be going in order to go help pay for this transaction. So that's kind of the overall big, I guess, 50,000 foot look at that, is that we're stretching out, and so these increments for these other projects as they come off can go back in and assist with this. My goal as part of the financing in the structure, and the direction I gave is not to impact the general fund at all. That our primary thing was where we would not need to actually dip into the general fund portion to make any payments. And so that's kind of like the overall arch to the solution.
We definitely, and of course we're barely into your presentation, Mr. Feldman. I'll shut up here in a minute and let you get back to it. But I guarantee you we need to have this as a study session at some appropriate time coming up, so that the whole council can see it, and the folks that wouldn't watch this or haven't seen it. So anyway, just put that in the back pocket, and I'll let you continue, Mr. Feldman. Thank you.
Sure. I think, a different type of presentation will help solve, kind of the mystery of what our refunding plan is. Because as you'll see in that presentation, the debt service that's coming up for Crackerneck looks a little spiky. And that's part of the problem. If you just kind of smooth out what the debt service looks like and match it to the revenue that we see coming, it helps you, take a bite out of the elephant a lot easier. And so moving on to Drum Farm is a TIF that is going to be terminating here in the next 18 months or so. There's one series of bonds outstanding, the 2016C. There's $820,000 in outstanding principal. The TIF revenues are currently projected to meet debt service obligations. And then the city can actually explore early termination of this TIF. There's sufficient cash in that particular TIF fund to make this April 1, 2022 debt service payment at any time. And so that's part of the formulation that Brian talked about, with moving successful TIFs and helping out other TIFs. Drum Farm is certainly going to be part of the solution there.
And so, excuse me, sir, there is no penalty for an early termination of the TIF?
Not for this series of bonds, no. We're past the call date on there, and so we can do prepayment on principal.
Terrific, thank you.
Mm-hmm. All right. Eastland Center, another TIF that is performing well. There's 3 series of bonds that are outstanding, each with the final maturity in April of 2022. We've got about $7 million outstanding. We've got in the TIF itself, you've got retail, hotel, and office development, public utility, public improvements, utility relocation, landscaping and grading. The TIF itself terminates about 2 years from now, and the TIF revenues are currently projected to meet debt service obligations. No concerns with Eastland Center. And this is another one that we're looking at as, being part of the solution with the other three. This one is generating a lot of sales tax to help. Hartman Heritage, there's one series of bonds that's outstanding. The final maturity is in about 3 months from now, April 1st. The principal payment on that is 1.8 million. The projects that are included within the Hartman Heritage is the Hilton Garden Inn, the Hereford House, Bed Bath & Beyond, associated public improvements with that. The TIF itself, it terminates on May 17th of this year. The TIF revenues are currently insufficient to meet the debt service obligations, and the TIF fund itself carries a negative fund balance. And so part of resolving this issue with Hartman is a component part of the Crackerneck Creek TIF plan, or the financing plan, I should say. And so we'll be coming forward with a solution on that, in conjunction with Brian and the city manager. Brian, any comments on that?
No, I'm glad. I just wanted to point out that, yeah, this is one of those items that we're very much aware of, that we identified early on, and it's a case. I don't necessarily want to issue debt to refund this, or to. In fact, I'm not even sure I have authorization to use revenue backed to do a debt transaction for it. So this would be one of those things we've talked with the underwriters on this, on Goldman Sachs, where we might have a payment plan from, again, talking about that solution of other TIFs terminating, for instance, like the Eastland terminating, and those funds going to fill this bucket first to pay this off before we start making debt service payments on a new debt for Crackerneck. So to say that it's definitely, it has to be solved at the same time we do the Crackerneck deal. At least I say it has to be. I mean, I would highly, highly recommend that we don't let this thing flounder out there, that we really want to take care of this. And so this is part of the solution, or not solution. This is one of the things that we're trying to solve. So it's not just Crackerneck. Our plan is, when this is done, when the Crackerneck deal is over, we'll have a plan of action for all of these. And so this is definitely part of that plan.
Mr. Hobart, you had a question?
Yeah, thank you, council member. So you've got some idea of a solution for this, and it may be, the deadline is worrying. That's the shocking part of this. The balance is a disappointment, obviously, but the deadline is the more concerning part to me. But we'll be able to have a plan and deal with this debt that doesn't incur massive penalties or some other tragic event.
Correct. Yeah, again, I would say, I think it was my first, I would say it was probably a week before I actually started with the City of Independence that I called the bond attorney and talked to them about this transaction. It was very, a new finance director coming on board. I definitely look at the outstanding debt, and this is one that really concerned me. So we've been talking a lot since I've been here for 2.5 years now, and again, the idea is the TIFs that are performing well, they have the cash available to make these transactions, to make this debt payment. So the city's overall bank account and the overall will not be harmed by making our debt payment. And if we get this plan in place, then it kind of gives us a smooth filled or a smooth glide path to, okay, yeah, we see that we have a deficit here, but look, in this case, again, it's Goldman Sachs, the ones that are going to be buying bonds. They see that, hey, we have a plan in place, and we'll have a payment plan to take care of this deficit portion. So, yeah, absolutely. We've been working with our bond attorneys for, again, 2.5 years looking at this thing.
I've got
Thank you.
on TIF fund carries a negative balance of a negative 2.498. Do we have to come up with that money as opposed also with the outstanding balance of 1.8? So we're really looking at a $4.3 million problem coming up in April.
I think there is, there's probably, it's not going to be quite that much, but yeah, you hit the head. So yeah, it's not just 2.5, it's 2.5
Okay.
plus the final maturity.
Okay, thank you. And when are we going to study this, Mr. Kidney?
I study this every day, honestly. We have, I have a calendar put together, I think, and I haven't talked to the city manager about all the dates, but probably either the second meeting in February, the second work session in February, at the end of the month, or maybe the second one in March would be a time to refresh this.
Yeah, because April's right around the corner. Okay, thank you.
Okay. And lastly, we have Santa Fe. There's 2 series of bonds for Santa Fe that were issued in 2015. And the final maturities for those go out to 2044. There's about $7.9 million in outstanding principal on those bonds. The TIF, the Santa Fe TIF itself terminates in 2023. There's also, like Crackerneck, there's a second TIF that contributes pilots and eats to the Santa Fe TIF to help support debt service. Kind of similar to what we're doing right now. Staff at the time, back in 2015, had recognized that Santa Fe was an issue and it was putting pressure on the general fund. And so, the 23rd and Nolan TIF, as well as restructuring the debt in 2015, helped kind of better align the revenues and expenditures. That said, there's still kind of a small delta there. The TIF revenues are currently insufficient to meet the debt service obligations, and the TIF itself does carry a negative balance. We'll be taking a look at this one as well as a part of Crackerneck. However, the call dates for the bonds are a little ways out there yet. So there's not a whole lot for us to do in the short term, but this is something that we'll be monitoring with staff and helping in the medium term come up with a solution for Santa Fe as well. Any questions on Santa Fe specifically before I kind of get to my wrap up slide? Okay. So just in summary, just kind of this is the big picture view again. The Centerpoint, Drum Farm, and Eastland all have the positive financial outlooks. Work by staff and consultants is underway to make the necessary adjustments for Crackerneck, Hartman, and Santa Fe. And then the plans themselves will be implemented, through the annual budget process in consultation with you all and all the stakeholders. And happy to answer any remaining questions that you may have.
Mr. Feldman, I'll of course have one. Did you do this for all the TIFs we have outstanding, or was it primarily ones that we need to take action on sooner than later? Where are we at in that process?
Sure. So the scope of this particular presentation are the TIF funds that have debt associated with them. You do have 16 other pay-as-you-go TIF funds, and where if as the name implies, if if the TIF isn't performing, that's on the developer, not necessarily on the city. And so, but this scope on this presentation is just the debt that's associated with TIF.
Okay, I appreciate that. Thank you.
In 90 minutes or so.
Okay.
Mr. Walker, I think your mic is open if you're intending to contribute or not.
Any more questions for the presenter? Okay. The next item on the agenda is for us to figure out the next meeting date. And I don't know what everybody's schedule is looking like. I know that we like to have the operating report out by the 15th of the month, and so we try and have it after that date.
I'm good the 19th or 26th, if we want to keep it on Fridays.
Fridays are the best for me personally, but is the
Works
best
for me.
for everybody else.
Okay.
Okay. And
Yeah, either one's fine. And if Mr. Kidney, if it's better to have the last one, to have extra time with the financials or whatever. I mean, I'm good. Whatever's helpful.
Well, I would say I've told my staff the fourth Fridays, but I would say we would be prepared for the 19th or the 26th, either one.
Does anyone have a preference?
Mm.
Okay, well, my preference is the 19th. So if that's okay with everybody else, I'd like to make it on the 19th at 1:30.
Okay.
Okay.
And Mr. Kidney, we never did go over the interest income sheet, and I do want the citizens to know that we're looking pretty good. Thanks for your good investing. And are all these documents on the city webpage someplace for citizens to take a look at and see what we're doing with the interest income and the TIF presentation we just got? I had not received that, and I just wondered where it was located.
You know what? I think it'd be a good idea for us to have a landing page for this committee.
I think that's a good idea.
I will work with I'll ask tech service if we can't create some sort of a landing page for this within the finance department, which I think makes sense that we would have the control on it. But I think that'd be a good place to land, like presentations or things that we've presented that people would go back and be able to look at. So,
and even if we have it like beforehand for people to follow along, I mean, without me looking at the operating reports before our meeting, it would be a wasted meeting. So if you could put things on there, that would be terrific.
Sure. And I will say, we do plan on presenting the annual financial report, the audit. We were prepared this time for just the financial statements, but I think we also have the required communication from the auditor that talks about internal controls and things like that. I will send that as soon as this meeting's over. I'll send it to the council. I'll get it posted on our audit site. So that gives you more time to actually go back through the CAFR and then also take a look at the auditor's paper or auditor's report. So we will plan on giving that presentation then on the February 19th.
That's great. And Mr. Nail, I don't know if you're still on, but if anybody has questions of Mr. Nail after looking at his document, we can maybe send it to Mr. Nail, and if necessary, Mr. Nail can bother you to come back. Otherwise, we can just submit it and have conversations with you, if that's okay with the rest of the committee. Is that okay with you, Mr. Perkins? Is that all right? I see Hobart saying yeah. Is that okay, John? Is that okay, Mr. Nail?
Absolutely. I'll answer whatever questions you've got. Just send them to me or give me a call.
Okay. Okay. Anything else coming before the committee? Then I thank you very much. It's 2:54. I think we should adjourn. Who's going to make that motion?
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Seconded.
There we go. Thank you all very much.
Thanks.
Right.
Yes, thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Thank you.
Yes.